Hey, it's Ryan Freeberg, and we're going to bring up a really big, important question here, and that is, what is awakening? What is awakening? If you are into conscious personal growth or spirituality, you may already know about the term awakening, and it generally has a spiritual definition and understanding. And awakening is simply experiencing higher consciousness. So there's different ways to look at it referentially here. We could say the cocoon of the butterfly awakens when it sheds the cocoon into a butterfly. And it's a transformational process. So with spirituality, the valuation is really spiritual awakening. There's not a valuation of the Western egoic mind, which we more value practically in our day-to-day lives. Awakening represents experiencing higher consciousness, and it's a spiritual thing. So it may seem like something is maybe missing for you, maybe something's a little off, maybe it makes sense, but it seems like spirituality is a separate thing than your practical Western daily life. So how do you awaken? Is it only a spiritual thing? Are you not entirely spiritual in who you are? Is it the ego that is really holding us back from awakening? How can we awaken to higher levels of self? What is self? What is consciousness? What is self-consciousness? Well, the question, what is awakening, is a very spiritual question. So if you've been into meditation, you've actually experienced, if you've been in higher states where you feel awakening, you start feeling higher spiritual bliss and warm buzziness, and you feel like key life force energy flowing through you in higher states of spiritual awakening. And we can reference the Buddha boy, for example. He's very conscious, meditating for years. As far as I remember when I saw it, without food or water. And that would be a very conscious state that he's in, a state of awakening to even more of the beauty, bliss, and power that already exists. So we can reference it spiritually. But if you're having blocks and you value awakening, how can you do more? What is your definition of self? Could you awaken on more levels of self-consciousness? That could also help your understanding of what is awakening now. The answer is yes, because emotional and sexual consciousness are non-physical. They're also spiritual. So spirituality is really about everything you are. Everything is energy. You're not even physical. We just referenced that because your body is actually waves of vibrating energy. Western science has discovered the unified field below the levels, the smallest levels atomically. They've come to that understanding that the East has known all this time. So string field theory, the unified field, the divine matrix, that scientific understanding has met the same understanding as spirituality. And we are energy. We are consciousness. So in a human experience, awakening can be done on all levels to connect to more of that divine power. So you actually experience it in your subjective experience. It's what you sense, feel, and know as reality. So self-awakening is awakening yourself or experiencing higher consciousness And it can be done on the different levels of self, in mind, heart, body, sexiness, and soul. You can awaken yourself to connect more to the spiritual power and divinity that you already are. So what is awakening? It's simply experiencing higher consciousness. So it's what you know as your subjective experience of reality. You are always the center. Like David Neagle says, you can practice turning around and you're always at the center of your reality. Well, your consciousness is everything. I mean, it's what you sense, experience, feel, and know as real. So when you awaken yourself, you actually change your vibration and your experience. And now we can reference, and I'm going to cross-reference and teach a lot on this, is Dr. David Hawkins' scale of consciousness. And at the bottom are the energy fields, the conscious energy fields of shame, of grief, of guilt. And then as you rise up, what you're feeling energetically associates with a level of consciousness. If you're in the conscious experience of shame, that's a very low, negative, detrimental, away from life, beauty, and source experience. So when you go to the level of neutrality, well, really the level 200 on a scale of 1,000, it's courage, and then above that is neutrality. Your energy field changes. So a lot of the West is really in above the level of 200 now, humanity has. When we were in all kinds of history of wars and all this negative taking away from life energy, it was below the level of 200. And that's the conscious experience you're in. It can be calibrated, and I'm going to teach more on this. And if you haven't discovered Dr. David Hawkins, definitely check into it. So awakening is experiencing higher levels of subjective reality. It's higher consciousness. Albert Einstein said the resolution to all problems is through higher consciousness. That's a paraphrase. And there's all kinds of paraphrases on that. No problem can be resolved at the same level of consciousness. Well, when you're in a feeling, a subjective conscious experience of grief, you can't resolve the problem until you're in a different energy field. So we're talking about is consciousness itself directly now. So with awakening, and everything about spirituality in all of the past was a valuation of connecting more to source, of subjectively experiencing higher consciousness, where you're in a higher vibration, where all of the other stuff, it doesn't affect you, because your energy field is just at an entirely different level. So if you've been stuck in life, like a lot of people, especially in the West now, have evolved to a level of logic, the level of, he calls it reason, the 400s. And it's a very mind valuing place to be. And from 500 above, it's love, joy, peace, enlightenment. So awakening is the valuation and subjective experience of higher consciousness. So at the level of love, at the level of 500, you're in a subjective experience where everything below it is less powerful. And these energies, they can be calibrated, and you just know when you're around someone who's truly in that state, you can feel that energy, and their subjective experience is of that level. That energy can influence you to rise to that level of consciousness as well. And really kind of the core around our methodology with self-awakening is the law of resonancy. So we really take the timeless conscious energy of already awakened people in very powerful states of consciousness. Their energy is already there. It already is. They're not in the experience of logic, mind, reason. They're not in the experience of pride and energy field, of neutrality. It's already awakened conscious energy. So with awakening, we can practically work on spirituality in all areas of self with other techniques with self-awakening, our methodology, self-awakening.com, to, a lot of it, again, is to resonate with already awakened conscious energy. Instead of trying to, if you're new to meditation, trying to meditate and get into an awakened conscious state, but you just can't because you're just not conscious enough. Your energy field is still dominant. If you're in pride or courage, that's still dominating you. One of the best ways to really rise is to get around conscious energy, and you'll attune to it through the law of resonancy. So you let that energy affect you, and that's really like an infinite fast track to awakening, because it raises your consciousness. Your subjective experience changes as you go. There's more power with higher consciousness. Awakening is experiencing higher consciousness. Some of the things that I'll show you in the future in other videos and in training programs for you to do, so you can experience awakening yourself, of being on those higher levels. We have an entire methodology. It's not just like one technique or something. We have all kinds of techniques, and self-awakening represents everything you're already doing. Self-awakening is your strategy of self-awakening, of spiritual awakening. You are a spiritual self, and you experience that in mind, body, heart, sexiness, and soul. So you can awaken yourself on all levels, and that's our valuation. Spiritual has become on all levels of self. It's not just an Eastern understanding of like Zen meditation. There's different things you can do because we're fusing personal growth and spirituality. You can now awaken yourself in all kinds of exciting different ways, because now we have media. They didn't have media thousands of years ago, and with great spiritual teachers. Well, spirituality, everything is connected, everything is one. Ultimately, there is no disconnection. So the awakened conscious spiritual energy that already exists, that's timeless because there's only the now, can be in a video, it can be in a freeze frame, a photograph, an audio clip. And you can, as long as it's higher conscious, allow it to affect your state through resonancy to awaken yourself. And you go through the alchemical changes. It changes your entire subjective experience from one of, and you already know this is true on a more basic consumer level, we'll just say, when you put a feel-good song on, it changes your state. Well, what it's doing is it's raising your vibration. The more conscious something is, the more power it has, the more influence it can have on you to transform. So if you're surrounded by low consciousness in mainstream TV programming, the level of consciousness, the subjective experience of anger, of revenge, that energy field of another violent action thriller, which can be great for diversion sometimes, but the whole energy field behind that, if you're subjectively living in that, it's below the level of 200, it's taking away from life. And, you have all these other issues and so forth. As you get to the level of love, the level of joy and peace, if you do, the states of consciousness, the subjective experience of that energy field is really powerful. And it's nothing like the 200s or even the logic of the mind and reason. The energy field of heart awakened states, of spiritually awakened states, are very powerful. So again, I'll be cross-referencing a lot on Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness. Awakening is really on all levels of self because you are spiritual. The greater definition of self would be that there is no block or disconnection in who you are. So if you have a soul valuation of self, the practical experience you may have found, it is emotional, physical, sexual, and mental as well. But those are all spiritual areas. So when we take a spiritual and awakening perspective towards yourself, towards your conscious, your subjective experience of life, you can connect more to source to experience higher levels of power, of awakening, of transformation. And what we do with self-awakening is, well, really self-awakening is your strategy. It's your strategy of personal growth and spirituality. It's open source in that you can use all of your favorite and best methodologies and learn and discover new ones on our community. And so a lot of the training with entertainment meditation and Shine Divine and self-awakening is to help you to get into those far more powerful, far more conscious, awakened states that are far away from the turmoils and so forth. And not doing it necessarily as an escape, but about becoming more conscious, more alive, more healed, more healthy, wealthy, rich, a rich spirit to express into the world, to anti-age, to be who you really are without blocks, away from everything that exists at lower consciousness. That's where the pain is. When you're really in an awakened state, none of that exists because your energy, your feeling, your knowing of reality is so conscious that once you reach a certain level, the ego, it won't even own you anymore. It won't stop you. That stuff doesn't affect you when you're in more awakened states. So the more you do awakening in your life, I wouldn't say just spiritual awakening, but self-awakening. Not necessarily our methodology, but the whole valuation of all the other teachers out there and spiritual gurus in awakening, teaching, connecting more to source to raise your vibration. With self-awakening, we bring that on all levels, so you can value that because you are spiritual on all levels. So you can connect to higher levels of heart consciousness, one love, and you can feel that. And you can, with what we do, entertainment meditation, you see the love, the power, and the connection in the whole world from different cultures, different expressions of it. And you connect in the unity of that power in very spiritual states. And so we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. The question here, what is awakening? Awakening is simply experiencing higher spiritual states of consciousness, connecting more to the power. Everything that exists in all its awesomeness, beauty, glory is connected in the unified field or spiritual oneness, otherwise referenced as God. Everything is connected. We're all connected. All of that power and awesomeness, you can bring and experience more of that connection, not just spiritually, but spiritually in your heart, even sexual polarity to the opposite sex. And you can feel that in your knowing of reality at very powerful levels of consciousness. So what is awakening? It's higher spiritual levels of experience, of subjective knowing. It's higher levels of consciousness. And that's how to resolve all problems. So awakening is spiritual, but it is on all levels of self because you are spiritual. So I encourage you to join our free community and get involved, taking the best of what you're already doing in spirituality, your practices, your techniques, and discovering other teachers and methods and so forth, combining, fusing them. That's what self-awakening we represent with this community at this day and age, is that fusion with Western personal growth. So we're really bringing spirituality and the mind together to awaken on all levels of self, which is spiritual. So I encourage you to get involved at self-awakening.com, and I look forward to hearing your stories and experiences on our forum. Thank you.